Your hand is pressed against cold concrete, grit sticks to your palm, and a loudspeaker crackles somewhere beyond the wall. You expect the famous American president at the microphone to be the man who knocks it down. But what if the sentence you remember did not open a single gate, and the line almost never reached the microphone at all? The payoff is hidden in a stack of disputed speech pages, and in one confused answer given 2 years later. Stay beside the concrete, and you can watch both sentences travel. Why would powerful advisors fight so hard to erase the first one? It is June 12, 1987. You stand in West Berlin near the Brandenburg Gate, with flags snapping above a crowd and a roughly 12-foot wall sealing the view ahead. Behind that concrete sit barbed wire, dog runs, guard towers, and armed men watching strips of raked ground. The wall has cut streets, families, train lines, and daily routines since 1961. Ronald Reagan is about to challenge Mikhail Gorbachev in public. But the dangerous part is not just what Reagan says, it is how close the words came to disappearing. So where did that line begin? You find its beginning in a helicopter and at a dinner table. White House speechwriter Peter Robinson gets the assignment in April and flies over a city split into movement on one side and empty ground on the other. An American diplomat tells him not to provoke anyone because West Berliners have supposedly learned to live with the wall. Then Robinson sits down with a dozen local people, plates and wine glasses spread across the table, and asks whether that is true. What turns a polite dinner into the center of a presidential speech? Ingeborg Els gives you the answer. She holds no cabinet title and carries no stack of briefing papers. She makes a fist, pounds it into her other palm, and says that if Gorbachev is serious about reform, he can prove it by getting rid of the wall. Another guest points toward a sister he has not seen in more than 2 decades. A man describes passing a guard tower every morning while a soldier watches through binoculars. At Robinson's desk, their anger becomes a test aimed at one person. But how does a feeling at a dinner table survive the machinery of Washington? The first version does not sound historic. Robinson writes a stiff demand to bring down the wall, then changes the verb to take down. Tony Dolan, the head speechwriter, sends him back to work. The cleaner sentence finally appears, but even Robinson briefly replaces it with a German demand to open the gate. Dolan puts the English line back. Why does that plain command frighten people who negotiate with the Soviet Union for a living? The pages reach Reagan on May 15th, and the speechwriters discuss them with him in the Oval Office on May 18th. Reagan likes the passage. The State Department does not. The National Security Council does not either, and officials submit at least 7 alternate drafts with the challenge missing. The ranking diplomat in Berlin sends another objection. What are all those careful people afraid will happen? They fear a public insult to Gorbachev, false hope for people trapped in the East, and a hard shove against delicate negotiations. Secretary of State George Shultz says the line is too tough. Colin Powell, then a senior national security official, presses the case against it. In Italy, on June 5th, Deputy Chief of Staff Kenneth Duberstein hands Reagan the pages again and explains the objections. Reagan reads the passage and decides to leave it in. Yet why risk a relationship over 6 sharp words when tanks, treaties, and checkpoints control the ground? At the Brandenburg Gate, you hear the answer inside the rest of the speech. Reagan says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." He also calls for fewer nuclear weapons, easier air travel, meetings in Berlin, and exchanges for young people from East and West. He says the two sides are armed because they mistrust each other, which turns the usual argument backward. The wall becomes a test of whether Soviet openness is a policy you can touch or only a word printed on a banner. What can one presidential sentence do against miles of concrete? It can transform a vague hope into a named demand. It can place one visible marker where diplomats prefer a cloud of careful language. It can tell listeners in the East that the wall is not accepted as permanent. But the wall still stands when Reagan leaves the microphone. That leaves the harder question hanging. If Reagan's line did not open the gates, what did? The answer begins far from the American podium and moves through streets filled by ordinary people. By 1989, East Germans are leaving through other countries, and peaceful crowds are marching for freedom to travel, and speak. Gorbachev has introduced glasnost, meaning openness, and perestroika, meaning restructuring, while pulling back from the old threat of Soviet military intervention. East German leader Erich Honecker resists those changes, then loses power as the pressure grows. Every Monday, shoes strike pavement and candles move through city streets. Which small action finally breaks the locked routine? On November 9th, you enter a fluorescent press room in East Berlin. Gunter Schabowski sits behind a table with papers scattered in front of him. He announces new travel rules that the government intends to control. A reporter asks when they take effect. Schabowski puts on his glasses, searches the page, and answers that the change is immediate, without delay. Television carries those words into living rooms before border guards receive usable orders. What happens when thousands of people believe a gate is already open? They walk toward it. The crowd thickens at checkpoint barriers, while confused guards work telephones without usable orders, and the people keep pressing forward. At 11:30, the Bornholmer Strasse crossing opens, then other crossings follow. Strangers embrace, small cars roll west, and hammers bite chips from the concrete. The wall has stood for 28 years, 2 months, and 28 days. It is opened by people moving together through a mistake that becomes a fact. So which sentence brought the wall down? That question offers no clean contest between Reagan and Schabowski. Reagan's command did not push the barrier over. Schabowski's mistake did not create the years of courage beneath it. Protesters made the streets impossible to ignore. Gorbachev removed the expectation of Soviet tanks. East German leaders lost control, reporters spread the announcement, and guards chose not to fire into the crowd. History arrives as many hands on the same locked door. Why does Reagan's line remain worth remembering? Because you can now see the job it actually performed. Reagan took talk of reform and gave it a physical test. Open this gate, remove this wall, let people cross. The challenge placed a bright public marker in front of Gorbachev and in the ears of people on both sides. It was not a spell, it was a standard that later events could either meet or expose as empty. The counterintuitive twist is that the line matters more when you stop pretending it acted alone. Can words move history without becoming the whole story? Yes, when they give people a clear object to judge and a promise to measure. No, when they erase the crowd, the guard, the reporter, the dissident, and the person packing a bag to escape. You can see both truths in the 2 stacks of paper, one polished by a White House, the other fumbled at a press conference. That is the modern mirror, waiting on your desk or glowing on your phone. Someone always asks for softer language, and someone else always claims a slogan did all the work. Which sentence helps you see the next action instead of hiding it? The safest version says, the wall will disappear someday. The sharper version names who can open it. Reagan keeps the sharper line, and Schabowski accidentally speaks as if the opening has already begun. Between those moments, thousands of people supply the verbs. Your first touch of cold concrete felt like proof that one sentence could never matter. But now, the grit on your palm marks the place where words met human hands. Keep your hand against that cold concrete and follow the next warning that shows what finally makes a wall move.